Different league, different level. Different level than you little boys.
That's not just trash talk. Yo Gotti is mocking young Dolph's people, and he's not being subtle about it. Ever since Dolph was gunned down, Gotti's been anything but quiet. But now, he's taken it to a whole new level. And Dolph's affiliates, they're not letting it slide. Their response has been brutal. Let me break it down. Mocking a man who ain't here to defend himself. Yo Gotti has been on a mission ever since Dolph's death, relentlessly targeting his crew in every way possible. But before we get to the clips, the taunts, and even the tears, you need to understand how this all started. Because this beef didn't begin in 2025. It didn't even start in 2018. No, this animosity goes all the way back to before Dolph was famous. And by the time he finally got his recognition, the writing was already on the wall. Memphis ain't big enough for two kings. Young Dolph, born Adolph Thornton Jr., wasn't just another trap rapper with a mixtape hustle. He was a walking business, a legacy, an empire in the making. Coming up in the roughest corners of South Memphis, Dolph took pride in building something without a cosign, without a major label, and most importantly, without ever bowing down to Yo Gotti. But here's the twist. In the beginning, there was no beef. In fact, young Dolph respected Yo Gotti. In a rare and sobering interview, Dolph himself recalled how Yo Gotti was the first industry figure to approach him on some brotherly, business-minded shit.
Yo Gotti was the first person that would reach out to me and be like, oh, I want to sign. He came to me like, let's do CMG and paper route.
Dolph didn't diss Gotti. He didn't sneak diss. He didn't even try to outshine him. He simply said no. And for some egos in this game, a no is more disrespectful than a diss track. What followed was years of silent tension that slowly spilled into the public. What began as whispers about Gotti feeling slighted turned into subliminal bars, venue bans, and shots fired, literally. The moment that turned heads came in 2017, when young Dolph's SUV was riddled with over 100 bullets in Charlotte, North Carolina. Miraculously, he survived. But let's be clear, that wasn't an accident. And while Gotti's team was quick to deny involvement, the whispers grew louder when one of his own artists, Black Youngsta, was arrested and charged in connection to the shooting. Those charges were later dropped, but the damage was already done. This wasn't just rap beef anymore. This was war. And Gotti started looking real comfortable, because while Dolph's cars were being shot at and his name dragged into courtrooms, Gotti was smiling on radio shows, deflecting questions and preaching peace like a man who didn't have blood on his hands or in his own backyard. But then came November 17th, 2021, a date that will haunt hip-hop forever. That's when young Dolph was shot and killed in broad daylight, buying cookies for his mother at Makeda's homemade butter cookies in Memphis, a family-run bakery, middle of the day, over 20 bullets. It wasn't just an execution, it was a message. And you didn't need to be a detective to know who the message was for. The streets knew it, the fans knew it, even the police knew it, with Yo Gotti immediately placed on the LAPD's radar just days after Dolph's murder, as Gotti just happened to be staying at the same LA hotel as some of the people under scrutiny for the killing. When asked about it during a Breakfast Club interview, Yo Gotti waved it off.
TMZ reports you're on the LAPD's radar in connection to the young Dolph shooting.
His response?
I'm always on police radar.
Always. He said it with a smirk, as if being connected to a murder investigation of a man he once mentored was just part of the job. But what really made the hairs on people's necks stand up was what came next, because Yo Gotti wasn't finished talking, not even close. In that very same interview, Gotti offered to read the final text he ever sent Dolph. And when you hear it, you'll wonder whether it was a heartfelt farewell or a passive-aggressive death note. Here's a sample.
How you gotta approach this shit, homie. Our city f***ed up, homie, and I'm trying to stop letting history repeat itself.
And yet, just months later, history repeated itself. Only this time, it ended in blood. So you tell me, was that a plea for peace or a prelude to war? And before you answer that, let's talk about Gotti's big brother. Because right after Dolph was gunned down, Gotti's own brother, Big Juke, was murdered too. And if you think that's just a coincidence, let me give you a name. Justin Johnson, aka Straight Drop, the man sentenced to life in prison for murdering young Dolph. According to courtroom testimony, he was allegedly paid $800 for the hit. But the order, according to trial speculation, it may have come from someone higher up, possibly Big Juke himself. Let that sink in. $800. Young Dolph's life ended for the cost of a PlayStation. And yet, to this day, Yo Gotti hasn't once condemned the violence in any serious way. Not during interviews, not during concerts, not even at Dolph's funeral. Instead, he doubled down on playing business as usual, promoting sneakers, dropping albums, and mocking his rivals' trauma in broad daylight. Just ask Boozy. In a brutal and emotional interview, Boozy laid it out plain.
See, I'm the first rapper that made him want rap.
And when asked how he felt about Straight Drop's sentencing, Boozy didn't celebrate Dot. He sighed. He looked away, and he said the one thing nobody in Gotti's camp seems willing to admit.
I hate that rap beef shit, bro. I hate it, bro. I just hate it. I ain't never seen nothing good come from it.
But what if somebody did? What if, and I'm just asking, what if one side got everything they wanted? Fame, power, money, and the throne, and all it cost was young Dolph. We're just getting started. Now let's talk about the hypocrisy behind Yo Gotti's no beef claim, the rise of CMG after Dolph's death, and how Key Glock, Paper Route Empire, and the streets of Memphis are still fighting to keep Dolph's legacy alive. But before we dive in, ask yourself this. If Yo Gotti really had no problem with Dolph, why does his empire look stronger than ever without him? The beef transcends death. When young Dolph was murdered, Memphis didn't just lose an artist, it lost a cultural cornerstone, a figure who had built his legacy block by block, without compromise, without major label handouts, and most importantly, without ever bending the knee to CMG. But when the dust settled over Makeda's cookies and the police tape came down, there was one question lingering in the minds of fans and foes alike. Why was Yo Gotti acting like nothing happened? Let's be clear. Yo Gotti said he had no beef with young Dolph. He said it multiple times. He said it during interviews. He said it in public forums. He even said it on The Breakfast Club.
I don't got no issue.
But if that's true, why was his team moving like they were in a war? Why were alleged hits circulating behind the scenes, aimed not just at Dolph, but at his whole circle, including a rumored $50K hit on Key Glock? Why were streets whispering about revenge? And why did Gotti's own brother, Big Juke, get taken out in the aftermath? Let's pause, let's rewind, and let's talk about perception, because Yo Gotti, in his own words, doesn't just dodge the beef narrative. He completely dismisses it, as if it's beneath him, as if acknowledging any of it would tarnish the polished business image he's tried to build.
Clearly, young Dolph must feel something because of the album that he put out afterward and everything.
And yet, in the very same breath, he speaks like a man who knows he's constantly walking on a razor's edge.
Somebody clearly got an issue with young Dolph.
But the issue ain't with him, right? He repeatedly emphasizes that he's moved on, that he's evolved past the street life, that he's about business now, that he's a CEO, a hustler, a mentor. But ask yourself, why does the violence always seem to orbit around him? Why do people like Boozy, who have no dog in the fight, call out the whole ecosystem of this rap beef, knowing full well that it's fed by silence just as much as it's fueled by diss tracks?
We don't say that when we egging on the beef. When everybody promoting the beef against other rappers, they love it.
Boozy's not just pointing the finger at Gotti. He's pointing the finger at us, at the culture, at the media, at the audience. Because make no mistake, this beef was profitable. For CMG, the death of young Dolph marked a seismic shift. CMG's visibility skyrocketed. Black Youngstar continued antics on social media, even performing diss tracks that referenced Dolph just weeks after the killing. To the dismay of many, but the silence of Gotti. Moneybagg Yo dropped multiple hits. Gotti himself secured a Puma deal. And suddenly, CMG's brand was in global conversations, not just street corners. So when Gotti calmly says he had no beef, but doesn't stop those under his own label from mocking the dead, what message does that send? He was asked directly about his artist, Black Youngstar, and whether he ever tried to check him when things got too personal.
You ever make a big homie call like, Black, chill out.
His answer?
Black Youngster, my little brother.
A little brother, but not a liability. Not someone you'd tell to chill when the bodies start stacking. Not someone you'd correct when he's rapping about the dead in front of the man's grieving city. Because here's the part that chills fans to this day. Black Youngstar performed Shake Some, a known Dolph diss, just weeks after his murder in Dallas, Texas. And Gotti? Not a single public reprimand, not a press statement, not even a cryptic tweet. He just kept pushing sneakers, promoting albums, and telling interviewers that the beef wasn't real, except people were dying. And even Gotti, deep down, had to admit the toll. In a rare moment of honesty, he compared his situation to Biggie's, another legend who swore he had no beef, right up until the moment he was ambushed in a car and left for dead. Still, Gotti insists it wasn't real. But Dolph's kids, they don't get to say that. They don't get to wake up on Christmas morning with their father back because the beef wasn't real. Because whatever Yo Gotti thinks he avoided by not engaging publicly, his silence was deafening. It changes the entire tone. Now it feels like dominance. Now it feels like control. Now it feels like a boss warning an underling. And yet, in the same interview, Gotti doubles down on confusion, claiming he never even argued with Dolph, that they never had a single hostile exchange.
And home never had one argument.
But then why does his little brother release videos mocking Dolph? Why does Dolph's name get dragged through CMG affiliate lyrics like it's a game? Why, if Gotti truly had no beef, did every single sign point to the opposite? You can't have it both ways. You can't say there's no issue while standing next to people sending subs, throwing threats, and stoking fires on Instagram and in records. And perhaps the most ironic part, Yo Gotti talks a lot about building up Memphis, about being a hometown hero, about putting other artists on. Yo Gotti keeps denying. By now, the picture is clear. Yo Gotti's public denial of any issue with young Dolph directly contradicts the behavior of everyone surrounding him, and more subtly, himself. He swears there was no feud, that they never even argued, that it's all internet rumors and industry gossip. But how do you explain the mockery, the subliminals, the arrests, the murders, the mock diss performances, all happening in the orbit of one man who supposedly had nothing to do with it? And more importantly, how do you justify the coldness? Because Gotti wasn't just passive after Dolph died, he was disturbingly cavalier. Let's go back to the same interview again, the same one where he tries to paint himself as the victim of gossip. He says this:
"That ain't me. Like, I really don't think home got no issue. I just think it's marketing."
Just marketing. Imagine that. A man dies, a father, a son, a CEO, and the man with the biggest motive on paper calls it marketing dot, but it gets worse. Later in the same conversation, Gotti says this about all the internet speculation:
"I ain't saying nothing home done, didn't do or nothing. I'm just talking about me."
That's the closest Gotti ever comes to acknowledging the possibility that Dolph might have faked or staged shootings for publicity. Let that sink in. While fans mourned, while Key Glock canceled shows, while Paper Route Empire struggled to recover, Gotti casually entertained the idea that maybe Dolph set it all up himself, as if the 22 bullet wounds were scripted, as if the bakery murder scene was a viral rollout, as if the man's death was just a failed campaign. And here's the sickest irony in all of this: Yo Gotti plays respectful. In fact, when DJ Envy presses him on why Memphis authorities didn't even want him in the city after Dolph's death, citing problems and instability, Gotti frames it as a misunderstanding.
Like, they gotta accept that, like, we successful rappers, and then sometimes your past, because the city just known you from when you were hustling and running around the street, like, outside of.
It's a good line. On the surface, it sounds like growth, but growth isn't proven through words. It's proven through restraint, through accountability, through stopping your own little brother from performing disses about a dead man in front of screaming crowds. Instead, Gotti doubled down on dismissiveness, brushing off responsibility and refusing to take ownership of the dangerous brand his label had helped cultivate. Let's look at one of the most revealing parts of the interview. Charlemagne asks Gotti if he even thinks it's worth it anymore. The tension, the drama, the possibility that someone from Dolph's circle might retaliate against him. Gotti's response?
God forbid they aim something at you.
And you be out.
But what's his solution? A press conference? A public sit-down? No, he brushes it off again.
I don't really understand it.
He doesn't understand it. This is the same man who texted Dolph messages about making sure I did my part, yet can't seem to grasp why the city is burning around him, why families are burying their sons, why the people closest to both him and Dolph are either dead or in courtrooms. He continues.
Me and home never had one argument. We never touched each other. We never changed no money. Facts is just, I'm the biggest rapper from Memphis.
The biggest rebel from Memphis. That's what it always comes back to. Power, control, positioning. This wasn't about respect. It wasn't about business. It was about territory, about who gets to be king. Dolph didn't want to be under CMG. He didn't want to share Memphis. He didn't want to play nice when the streets whispered about betrayal. And for that, he was mocked, lied on, followed, shot at, and ultimately left to bleed out on the floor of a bakery, while Gotti got deals, tours, Puma Dot, and silence. Because what happens next in the Breakfast Club interview is one of the clearest indicators of Gotti's media strategy: deflection. Every time the conversation veers toward responsibility or emotion, Gotti pulls it back to his business, his deals, his growth.
I mean, you have to diversify. You can't just do one thing forever.
It's the voice of a mogul, but not a grieving man. Not a man who just lost his alleged little homie. Not a man who claims he only ever wanted to help. The interview even ends on this note, a reference to Gotti's partnership with Roc Nation and his restaurant ventures, as if the murder of a Memphis icon had been just another speed bump dot. And maybe for Gotti, that's exactly what it was. Let's bring this home. Young Dolph never begged for validation. He built Paper Route Empire brick by brick. He gave back to his community. He sent kids to college. He gave away turkeys on Thanksgiving. He turned down millions for the sake of ownership and independence. He walked the walk. He died on that walk. And Yo Gotti, he talks the talk. He talks about positivity, about growth, about evolution. But when the bullets started flying, he said nothing. When his artists performed mock tributes, he did nothing. When the city cried, he turned up the volume on his rollout. This isn't just about a beef. It's about what happens when power is prioritized over people. It's about what happens when silence becomes complicity. It's about the cost of a crown and who ends up paying the price. When young Dolph was murdered, the spotlight didn't just shift to CMG. It also landed, whether he wanted it or not, on Key Glock, Dolph's protege, blood cousin, and arguably the second heartbeat of Paper Road Empire. But in the weeks that followed the killing, Glock didn't release a diss track. He didn't go on social media and play tough. He didn't sit down for press interviews or claim revenge. He went silent. And when he did speak, it was raw pain. A single message on Instagram stories read, "Stop asking me if I'm okay. No, I'm I'm not. That wasn't a rapper talking dot, that was a son mourning a father figure. And while Yo Gotti was getting dressed for red carpets and shoe deals, Glock was left to pick up the shattered legacy of Paper Route Empire, a label now stripped of its face, its funding, and its future. But the real insult, the real mockery, it came from Black Youngstar. Let's not sugarcoat it. On December 22nd, 2021, just over a month after Dolph was killed, Black Youngstar took the stage in Dallas and performed Shake Some, a known Dolph diss, with Dolph's name included. Now, this wasn't a track from years ago. It wasn't a fan request. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional. The timing, blatantly disrespectful. The tone, mocking. And what made it worse was that Black Youngstar doubled down online. In a since-deleted Instagram post, he appeared in front of a mausoleum, which fans speculated was meant to symbolize a gravesite, possibly Dolph's. The caption, "I am the truth." He knew exactly what he was doing. And Yo Gotti said nothing. Not publicly, not privately, not even the bare minimum PR move of saying, "We don't support that." Nothing. Because silence, when you're in power, is an endorsement. And this wasn't the first time Gotti let his soldiers do the dirty work while he played the clean-cut businessman in front of cameras. It was the blueprint. There's this myth in hip-hop: if you don't speak on something, you're innocent. That silence is maturity, but silence is strategy. Yo Gotti has built an entire brand off avoiding the smoke while surrounding himself with people who breathe it. From Black Youngstar's antics to Straight Drop's eerie connections to CMG affiliates, there's a long pattern of violence and disrespect orbiting Gotti, even if his own hands appear clean. Let's not forget what Boozy said in his Vlad TV interview.
Whole world never say that when they egging on the beef. And everybody love it.
Boozy's not just talking about fans, he's talking about industry execs, label heads, artists, people who benefit from the chaos, sell the records off the back of the drama, and keep it going because controversy pays better than peace. And when Dolph died, that machine didn't stop. It sped up. When Dolph founded PRE, he wasn't trying to compete with CMG. He was trying to create an alternative, a blueprint for Memphis artists who didn't want to be bought, bullied, or broken by the system. But after Dolph's death, that infrastructure began to crack. Key Glock, despite his talent and loyal fan base, hasn't come close to replicating Dolph's influence or command. Not yet, not without help. And the rest of PRE's roster, struggling. Without Dolph's business acumen, financial backing, and visibility, the label began hemorrhaging momentum. Radio spin slowed, social engagement dipped, media coverage dried up. Meanwhile, CMG became a hydra. Every time you cut one head off, 3 more grew back. Glorilla, ESTG, Mozzie, 42 Doug. CMG became the death row of the South without the indictments. And that's the part that hurts. Because if Dolph had lived, if his empire had been allowed to flourish, Memphis might have had a real balance of power. But Gotti's silence and Youngstar's outright mockery ensured that one side would dominate and the other would grieve. And if you think this is just about Dolph, you're wrong. This is a pattern as old as rap itself. Think back. Think of Biggie and Pac, of 50 Cent and Ja Rule, of Jeezy and Gucci Mane. How many of those stories end with one artist dead and the other more famous than ever? How many of them involve silence from the winning side? How many of them make fans complicit because we turn the beef into entertainment? This wasn't just about Memphis. It was about a model. Diss, clapback, shooting, funeral, streams, and when it's all over, the man left standing builds a brand on the grave. Gotti didn't invent the cycle, but he mastered it. Gotti mocked Dolph's team not by laughing at them, but by profiting off their loss while pretending to mourn. He mocked them by calling it marketing, by playing coy, by letting his artists throw subliminal shots while he smiled in interviews. He mocked them every time he said, "I had no issue," and then let Black Youngstar dance on Dolph's metaphorical grave. He mocked them by standing on the BET stage like a boss, while pre-release tribute songs that barely got traction. He mocked them with endorsements, with interviews, with silence. Because the truth is, mockery doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's what you don't say. Sometimes it's the smirk when you say, "I never had a problem with him." Thanks for watching. Check out other cards on the screen.